Welcome to another edition of Living Legacies. I'm Tom Morrow, your host, and today I'm interviewing an old friend, a very old friend from Escondido, but he's known to everyone around the area through the voice of radio, and that is my good friend Doug Best. Doug, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tom.
Or as some of the viewers might know you better as Lovable Doug Best.
That's true, and I don't try to fight that. I just try to live with it.
Well, you and I have known each other for about 27 years, and over the years we've seen a lot together. But let's go back at the beginning. You were born in Edmonton.
I was born in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and 75 years ago, by the way.
Yes. Yeah, well, you definitely are qualified historically as being in the Living Legacy zone, anyway. So.
Yeah, I've earned all my skid marks.
Now, you were born and raised there. Went to school there.
Went to school there, and joined the in 1943. I enlisted in the RCAF, and went through a vigorous 6-7 months of training as a air gunner, and at the end of the 7th month I was over in England, and we were being trained there to go into the heavy bombers.
And you flew on what?
Well, I started on the old Wimpy Wellingtons, they used to call them, and that was the two-engine plane that had fabric as the fuselage. So there wasn't much protection against anything that might come along your way. And then we went to a heavy conversion unit, and we went into the 4-engine Lancasters, which was in the same league as the 17s and the 24s.
But you got to go at night.
Yes, we went in. I used to kid all of the guys from the 8th Air Force that we'd go in at night and start a fire for them so they could get the smoke the next day for the 8th Air Force. So.
Well, you know, there's been a lot of controversy over the years. Was it any safer flying at night than it was during the daytime?
No, it wasn't.
I mean, did you have the 109s?
We had
the
fighters at night, and we would not get them to the degree the 8th Air Force did, but they had a lot more planes out than we did. So when we were going in at night, we would see the 17s and the 24s coming home. I mean, really, really battered up, and I knew why they flew such close a formation. It was for gunfire, but it also made it a lot easier for the German fighters just to sit back with their 20-millimeter cannons and just shoot right into the midst of it. So, but they never asked me, so
you didn't give them the benefit of your years.
Right.
Well, after the war, you went back to Canada?
Yes.
What did you do the day you got out?
The day I got out, I went down to the American consulate and applied for a visa to come to the United States, because I had been fortunate enough to spend a 30-day leave in San Diego with my mother and my new stepfather. And I quickly put it together. I went down to the Chamber of Commerce, and I quickly put it together that if I moved to San Diego, I would no longer have to stand on a corner in 30-degree below zero weather and wait for a streetcar that was already full before it got to me. So I was young, but I did. I put all of that together, and it took 10 months to get a visa. And in that interim, I worked for the Veterans Administration in Edmonton. Then finally, one day, I got a registered letter, and here was my visa. So I hit upon the scene in San Diego in July of 1946.
What was San Diego like in 1946?
Well, it was finally getting around to the point where there was more civilian population than there was military, but you could still go down to the foot of Broadway, and it was a big ocean or sea or whatever you want to call it of white hats bobbing up and down Broadway, but the guys coming in off the ships and over at North Island and so forth. And San Diego was in heavy transition at that point, and then all of a sudden they came along with building thousands and thousands of tract homes in the San Diego area under the GI Bill, and San Diego just blossomed.
Well, now I know it was tough for returning vets, American vets, to get jobs. What was it like for a new immigrant like yourself to get a job?
It was extremely difficult. Number one, you couldn't go to work at places like it was Convair back then, and then it became General Dynamics, because that was all government work. So you had to be a citizen to work there, and when you would fill out your application and place of birth was Canada. That had many people say, well, we have enough of our own unemployed. Why would we worry about you? And as a matter of fact, I was pretty close to getting back on the Greyhound bus that brought me down and go back to Canada, because
those winters didn't look all that bad.
Well, they were better than unemployment.
Yeah.
I was running short on money. So, but all of a sudden, I got a phone call from a very lovely lady at Walker Scott's department store at 5th and Broadway. It was one of the main stores. This was before the
it was a big department store.
before the mall. Yeah, it was a big one. There was Marston's and Walker Scott. And she said, "You're a small person, but I have a job if you think you can handle it." And this was hustling freight off the sidewalk onto this elevator that came up through the sidewalk.
Yeah.
And I used to carry big cartons of shoes that weighed more than I did.
Yeah.
And I didn't think there was much of a future in that either.
What kind of a wage was it in those days?
Oh, you know, Tom, I really don't remember, but it wasn't very much.
Yeah.
It just wasn't very much. But it was better than unemployment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I worked there for a few months, and I put in an application at one of the title insurance companies, and every Monday morning I would zip down to the old Union Title, it was called, and talk to the personnel manager, and I think finally he hired me to get rid of me. So I worked there, and then right across the street from us was the old United States National Bank, and up on the second and third floors was KSDO. And in those days it was a musical station. It was owned by C.R. and Holt Smith. C.R. and Holt Smith also owned the bank, and he owned the Pacific Coast San Diego Padres when it was the Pacific Coast League. So
he owned about half of downtown San Diego.
Yes.
Or at least his
he did
shareholders did, yeah.
He did for a while, and then I don't know what happened to him. But I know a lot of people in radio remember the name Don Howard.
Yeah, I knew Don.
Don Howard and I became friends, and Don was sort of my mentor, and he talked me into going into KSDO and cutting an audition, which I did.
Did you still have that golden voice that you have today?
No, I had to work on that. But that was part of what he taught me, was how to.
What did he see in you?
Well, he said you have good tone, good voice tone, but he said your breathing's terrible, and you've got to learn to be yourself and not try to be somebody else. And so finally, and I thought it was very clever, I got on the air. There was a deal. You remember the old Nash automobile? You're old enough to remember
sure,
that.
Yeah.
Well, in the 50s, Nash came out with the Nash Rambler. So I went up to this Nash dealer, and I talked him into buying an hour on Saturday afternoons. And that was how I got on the air. I sold the hour. And I thought it was very clever. I called this program the Record Rambler. Don't you think that's good?
Oh, yeah, that's real original.
I just had to sneak that.
I mean, we think some of the stuff that the kids come up with today is corny, but they have no corner on that. Okay.
So anyway, that was the start of my broadcasting, and as I say, back then, primarily the station was. Music, nights, of course, and then when the Padres were out of town, some afternoon baseball, but the evenings were during the summer.
Was this a full-time job? Or
no, I was still.
You still worked at the title company? I was still
messing around in the title company until I could get on full-time. And it wasn't easy because there was a lot of experienced people coming out from the East Coast and the Midwest. Good voices, you know. They weren't somebody that was on the bottom trying to climb up. They were already there, so it was difficult to get.
You have to do your own engineering?
Yes.
Yeah. So
back in those days, it was 78 RPMs.
Right.
And we had 4 turntables. We would have 2 for the music and 2 for the commercials, which used to come.
How many records did you break before you got them on the?
Quite a few, but the biggest job was putting those things away after you'd spend as much time putting them away as you did using them.
I suppose they'd have to have backups because those records did break so easily.
Oh, they were very easily broken, yes.
Yeah. Well, before we get on into the modern era, I know the story that you told You've told many times on the air, but I always enjoy hearing it about some of the great musicians, great bands that you covered down through the years. And of course, one of our heroes, yours and mine, is Count Basie.
Yes, Count Basie. We managed to have Count Basie appear twice at the gymnasium at Escondido High School.
Mm-hmm.
And
but you had met him many years before that.
Yes, but just very briefly. But Dick Harvey, do you know Dick Harvey?
Mm-hmm.
He was the program director, or the musical director at Escondido High.
Right.
And he was also the musical director at Palomar College,
Mm-hmm.
after he retired from the high school. And he took a group of kids over to Switzerland, a jazz festival over in Switzerland, and he went down to have a sarsaparilla, he says,
Mm-hmm.
when he got all of his...
They serve a lot of that in
Yes.
Switzerland, yeah.
Right. And so he was downstairs in the bar, and he started conversation with this gentleman. And it turns out this gentleman was the booking agent for Count Basie. And Dick Harvey said, well, if you're ever in the Escondido area, we'll guarantee you at least 1,000 people. So
Easy.
yeah. So then he said, I didn't think I'd ever hear from this guy again. But about 2 to 3 weeks later, he gets a phone call, and I don't remember the gentleman's name, but he said, we have an open night. If you want us, we'll be there.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden, Dick Harvey has a very short time to get 1,000 to 1,200 people into the Escondido gymnasium.
I was
high
one
school.
of them.
Well, you were what? Right.
Yeah, that was the night I interviewed Freddie Green.
That's right.
Yeah.
And but you remember what a marvelous job the kids did in that gymnasium. They took wrestling mats and they took blankets, anything they could hang from the rafters,
Oh, yeah.
because the acoustics were terrible.
Oh yeah, it didn't sound like you were in a gym. They
Yeah.
they really
They did a
good.
great job.
Well,
And,
but you were with KFMB for a while.
I worked with KFMB after I worked for KSDO. I worked there for a short time, well, 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
and that was when it was a CBS affiliate.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did some fill-in work at KSON a long time before it went country western.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I moved to Escondido, I got to know Mrs. Owen, who was the owner of KOWN,
Mm-hmm.
and she asked me if I'd fill in and do some stuff for her, and I did. And then she sold out to Alan Scuba, who later became mayor of Escondido.
Mm-hmm.
And I've worked for every ownership of KOWN, as it was originally known. And then when the present ownership bought it, they changed, they decided that they would simulcast.
Mm-hmm.
And country western on the AM and the FM. And that's when I was left out in left field, I guess.
Yeah, they didn't play much of your music.
No, not a bit of it.
No.
And that's when I came over to KGMG in Oceanside. So that's part of the 31 years that
Right.
we put together broadcasting the big
But
bands.
that program that you did has been so popular for so many years. For those viewers who don't know what we're talking about or has never heard you, Doug Best has been known for years for his big band music and just a touch of Dixieland music on Saturday mornings. There were a few Sunday mornings that you had to
Right.
do, but Saturday mornings basically. And tell us how you got started with that on the Saturday morning gig.
The ownership and Lyle Davis, a lot of people know Lyle Davis in the North County. He was the general manager of KOWN.
Mm-hmm.
And Jim Cotton and I, a mutual friend of ours,
Mm-hmm.
who unfortunately is not with us anymore, but Jim Cotton and I went into partnership, and we bought 3 hours of time from KOWN.
Mm-hmm.
And we started the big band. We called it Doug Best Swings, and we called it that all the way through. And our format was then, and it was until the day that they cut me loose over at K-Spa. We played 3 big band records and 1 New Orleans jazz.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't vary from that format. And the old saying, if it isn't broke, don't fix it.
Well, it must not have been broken because I'm still getting phone calls from people, that love that kind of music. They say, when are we going to get Doug Bass back on the air?
Well, it made no sense. From the very, very start, the program had the #1 rating, and that wasn't something I made up. That was Arbitron that said that for the past 20 years plus, I had the #1 spot, and I also took a lot of sponsors in there. But with just cut loose in 5 minutes, 31 years.
Well, these young kids, what do they know?
It was an interesting experience when we bought the time, and we could control the commercial content. And it was a little aside. Lyle Davis phoned up one day and he said, we got to renegotiate that 3-year contract. I said, call me in 3 years. Because never in their wildest imagination did they think that Jim and I could generate the income that we did from that that 3 hours. And of course, Jim was an excellent advertising man.
Oh yeah.
And so he used to do all of the copywriting, and he was pretty good with a typewriter. So I said, well, you could, along with that, you could do the billing. So then Jim, for personal reasons, had to bail out, and then I took over the contract. And after the contract was over, then they would no longer sell me the time. I went on a salary and a commission on anything I could sell.
It's called You're Making Too Much Money.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's what.
Well, along the way, you got yourself involved in politics.
Yeah.
And you served a number of years as not only city council member, but you were mayor a couple of times.
I was mayor for 2 years, and most people don't hold that against me. But, Jim Cotton, by the way, was I used to kid him. The first time that I ran for council, Jim was my manager, and I lost.
And you never let him forget that either. I remember.
So anyway, but Jim, it was through urging on Jim's part that I get involved. So 2 years after that, we did it again, and we won.
You were on the council, what, about 6 years?
No, 12 years.
12 years?
Yes, I was on from 1976 through 1988, and I was mayor 1978 through 80. So it was an interesting experience.
Yeah.
And all that time, of course, I was able to keep the broadcast because it was a part-time endeavor.
Yeah, yeah. Now, what are the prospects of, just to answer the many questions of readers and viewers out there, that people keep asking, well, when are we going to get Lovable Doug back on the air? What can you tell us?
Well, I am in a negotiation now with the college station, which used to be the
KGMG.
It is now KKSM.
Yeah, I have to think about that.
And it's owned by the college, and of course their primary thrust is to take care of the students. And but I understand there's a slot that opens up on Saturday mornings, which would just be a natural.
Sure.
And
well, kids don't get up early on Saturday mornings.
Well, but old people like us do.
Yeah, I know.
And we were a long time on the broadcast. We broadcast from 6 in the morning till at noon, and the highest listenership time was between 6 and 9. So the people do get up and they like to listen to good music with their breakfast and so forth.
Well, there was a time there, I remember, back in the late 80s, I guess it was, you were on every day when KGMG was still playing the big band music, and that was their format.
Right.
But
program directors are strange animals, and owners are even stranger. And so some weird decisions are made, and the radio is not a place where you make enduring and long-lasting enduring friendships, because there's so much change in management and philosophy and so forth.
And it's what sells and what people are listening to, and it's just because big band music was our favorite type of music, it's a fact that there's a small percentage of the audience that are listening to it, and the biggest part are listening to music that you and I wouldn't even understand.
But that's right. Wouldn't even want to.
I always said go ahead.
Remember Newton Minow? He was the head of the FCC at one time.
That vast wasteland.
That vast wasteland.
Yeah.
And it still is.
Yeah.
It still is. But
it's hard to find big band music on the dial now.
It is.
There's nothing on FM But AM, there's only like 1 or 2 stations in any community.
Well, even K-pop has abandoned a great deal of the big band music and gone more contemporary.
Yeah, so has K-Spa.
Right. So, but in turn, their ratings have gone down.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't understand, but sometimes logic just goes out the window, and understanding's not part of it.
Tell us about your family.
I am, we've been married for 54 years to the same lady.
Mm-hmm.
I have,
and that's saying something these days, yeah.
It is, that's a pretty good record.
Yeah.
I have 2 children and 6 grandchildren, and these grandchildren range all the way from 4 years old up to 17.
Now, your family all in the Escondido area?
Yes, I all live in. Well, my daughter lives in Murrieta, but she works in Escondido. So. Mm-hmm. But both of my children graduated from Orange Glen High School in Escondido. So we're sort of natives there. We moved to Escondido in 1958. So we've seen a lot of change.
Now,
not just North County, but Escondido.
Now, in 1958, I remember Escondido was this little town up north of the new Naval Air Station called Miramar.
Right.
And I was going through boot camp in San Diego. What was it that drew you to Escondido?
Well, I was still working in part-time in the title business, and they transferred me from Chula Vista to work the North County, Escondido, Vista, Fallbrook, so forth. And it was a long commute on that old 2-lane highway.
Well, not only that, but it was a cultural shock too, wasn't it?
Well, Escondido was very small.
Yeah.
It was, I would say, 12,000 people in 1958. Very small, very, very cliquish.
Well, what's changed?
I don't know what I've ever done to Tom Moore, but he's really after Escondido. And I said, I put time on the council. He said, well, that doesn't matter. So,
listen, we've been kidding each other ever since I moved to Oceanside 10 years ago, because I used to live in Escondido, and we've had a lot of fun with this.
Right.
But, well, I know there's so many more stories that we could tell, and of course, we could spend a whole 30 minutes just telling Jim Cotton stories that would relate to you and I, but we've run out of time, and it goes real fast on this show, and as you know, you've been in the broadcast business, but we thank you for coming in and traveling all the way over to the...
Well, it was a long trek.
Yeah, I know.
Highway 78, we lovingly call that the highway to hell.
Yeah, it was only 2 lanes when you first moved up here. But
so,
well, we appreciate you coming in, Doug.
Hi, Thomas. Always good to see you.
And sharing this legacy with us. And we hope that you've enjoyed this account on Living Legacies. I'm Tom Morrow, your host, and we'll see you next time on Living Legacies. This program is made possible through the generous underwriting grants of Hatter Williams and Purdy Insurance Services of Oceanside, providing North County with complete insurance needs for more than half a century. The TriQuest Corporation, providing quality office and manufacturing space in Oceanside. And the North County Times, serving all of North County with complete local daily news coverage and internet services.